first official public meeting of our USDB Standing Committee. We appreciate USDB for providing our interpreter, Cindy Anderson, for us today. And today we will be moving forward on recommendations from the Executive Appropriations Committee of the legislature and some memorandum that was put out by Public Education Appropriation on some questions that they would like answered in the next 6 months. So our committee today will really be looking at how do we want to move forward in, oh, sorry, how we will map out. Basically, there will be a presentation that's due in November. And how do we want to map out our discussions and answer those questions? So for those of you that looked at our civic clerk, we had him back up those questions. So first of all, moving to, and I guess I will ask Scott Jones, did any of these recommendations make it to a final bill, or do we work off of these appropriations? Do you know?
We have to work off the appropriations in the base budget, which is 55 million roughly. I mean, I don't have the exact amount, but it's around 55 million. They that is requiring us to do this is the legislature that's in the bills. You have Representative Perucci's bill, and then you have the intent language surrounding the facilities, right? That all these studies have to be done. So in a way, yes, it came out in legislation, but we have to work within the base budget. Does that answer the question, ma'am?
So specific language, intent language, we will simply work off of those in the memorandum from public ed
Correct.
appropriation and the intent language that was found within education appropriation. Okay.
So whenever we get asked the question of who is the they is the legislature. The they is the memorandum that you have. The they is the legislation that Representative Perucci passed. The they is the intent language, yes, in the memorandum that's signed by those legislators.
Okay. I didn't know whether or not there was more beyond those two
No.
documents. Okay.
Well,
Other than that
there's,
which passed.
there's implications of all of the legislation that passed from this session that indicates that the they is the legislature wants us to operate within the 55 million to provide the board's position on the services for the kids, in consideration of the law and our own board rules, those types of aspects. So it's not just the memorandum, it's not just the facilities, it's the services and, the fact that the board had requested a $4 million bridge of funding to ensure the direction of providing those services. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we have member Earl and then member Davis. And if you want to speak, will you turn on your camera and I will turn mine off?
Yeah, and my other comment, my only comment would be, or well, not only comment, but comment right now would have to do with the fact that as much as the board had a position we made request, the legislature is telling us what they want the position to be. So, we're acting on their direction, not on what the board had requested. So, and as much as there's written language that we can look at, there's also people talking that are not always, legislators that are not always getting that communication back to us. And hopefully we can work with some legislators so that there's a clear directive from one another and we can get rid of any misinformation, or we can communicate needs both back and forth in a clearer way.
Thank you. Member Davis.
Just for clarity and for the public, when we're referring to memorandum, is it the memorandum on page 57 of the PEA booklet that's in backup? Is there anything else that's included in what we're talking about?
So on page 7 and 8 of the EAC motions, there's just one specific line that we'll be referring to. It states that the legislature intends that the State Board of Education, in consultation with the Public Education Appropriations Subcommittee and the Education Interim Committee, review USDB's governance, role within the public education system, scope of services, funding of student obligation of the student's resident local education agency in the provision of services and facilities, and the provision of capital facilities for the schools. So that's, sorry, go ahead.
Okay. So I missed that. Is that in backup right now?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm looking at the PEA one. I need to look at the EAC one. And then are we still using the PEA memorandum that's on page 57 of the PEA booklet, or are we
Yes.
not using that either?
Yes, because you notice those were divided up into the different sections that really that EAC one references.
Okay. Got it.
And
Thank
and
you.
so as we work forward, as we lay out that timeline, then we'll go back to that memorandum and use those questions to work through each of our meetings.
Thank you.
And hopefully by November, we have all the answers.
Fingers crossed. A lot of work ahead.
Yeah, yeah. And as you speak, it would be great if you, when you speak, if people would turn their camera on so that then people know exactly who's speaking for our interpreters.
Yes, I will. Thank you.
All right. Do you have anything else you'd like to follow up on that?
Not in this very moment.
All right. So let's look at those 5 areas. I think there's 5. We have USDB governance. We have the role within the public education system, scope of services, funding, obligations, and facilities. So basically we have 5 separate entities that need to be discussed as we move forward. What I'd like to hear from committee members right now is your input on what order we need to work those in and who needs to be involved in those conversations and how we want to move forward in those. I think when it comes to the scope and obligation of LEAs, we're going to have some outside meetings where we invite some of those most highly impacted LEAs into the conversation. When it comes to governance, we need to look at, is what we're doing here sufficient? Is that going to answer the questions of the legislature? Randy, go ahead. Or Member Booth, I apologize.
All right. I would be very interested to hear from our staff and the leaders of USDB in terms of what are the most critical priorities among those 5. Is there a time sensitivity perhaps with facilities because of other entities and agencies within the state that need to become involved in the planning and preparation process leading towards eventually meeting the needs that we have in terms of facilities? Maybe that's not as important as the governance piece or whatever they would think. I'd just be interested in hearing if they have a sense of what we ought to take on first, because there's no question that we're going to be devoting a full meeting to some of these issues and possibly even more in additional meetings, as you said, Leanne. So if we could hear something from our leaders of USDB, that would be helpful, because I'm happy to jump on board and discuss and dive deep into whatever it is they're thinking needs to be attended to first.
Okay, thank you. Superintendent Coleman. You are muted.
Sorry about that. It looks to me like the most urgent items would be those in the middle of that paragraph. Scope of services, funding of students, obligation of the student's resident LEA in providing services and facilities. Not the facilities so much, but I think the scope of services, funding, and the relationship with the LEAs are the first things we should tackle.
I agree from Scott. That should be the priority.
I,
Or,
I agree as well.
okay, and how would you like to see those move forward? I think when it comes to scope of services, I think that may need to be a meeting outside of the public sphere where we look at individual student needs and compare what USDB is offering with what LEAs are offering. And that might, because we'd be dealing with some very specific information towards students, it would be better not to share private information in the public. But that really is my perception. I'd love some clarification on that if I'm outside of what's appropriate.
I was just to concur with that. I think that it has to be done outside this meeting, and it will probably be, as you start on one topic, it will involve the other topics will come up. I think that will be a natural flow.
Okay.
Yeah, that I concur with that. And that could entail the subcommittee digging into our internal records and just taking a look at everything that would help them to have that discussion.
Now, we met for an hour prior to this to discuss some funding obligations. I know that there's some discussion within board members as they'd like to move and how we move forward on that. Do we have any discussion on that matter with the current needs? The board had requested a $4 million bridge funding in order to make up the difference as we move forward on how to create a long-term sustainable funding mechanism for USDB. That bridge funding did not get funded, and so we're looking at ways to make up that difference. Member Vice Chair Booth.
Thank you. So now that we've identified these areas that we want to focus on, how is going to be the best way to approach these subject areas? I'm confident that mostly it's bringing board members up to speed, because there's no question that the superintendent and assistant superintendents are already fully aware of services that are being provided that are critical, and they know how much they're doing as compared to LEAs. And so it's a matter of bringing information that they've already met on for days and weeks and months into a format or into a location where it can be accessible to those of us that need to also be brought up to speed. We just need a quick course in these areas so that we are able to be supportive in all the right ways as we move forward and make important decisions.
Superintendent Patton.
Thank you. I don't know if this answers or gives you a little bit of an answer to your question, Board Member Booth. But I want to give you a couple of examples of what we're dealing with right now, and what we are telling IEP teams. And because I think that might put in perspective as far as what would be the most important thing to do. and how we approach it. So we have situations where we are providing services or we're not providing services, but there's an IEP and there's a placement decision for a student. That student may be 3 years old. That student may be in junior high. We don't have the space. We don't have the space for that child. Now, legally under IDEA, we cannot say that, nor would we want to, but we are explaining that we don't have the capacity at this time, either space, I'm speaking for the School for the Blind, space, nor do we have the personnel for any more students to come starting next year because of how many we're getting. We're also facing that in outreach with personnel. Now, these are very real, again, under IDEA, to be compliant, we don't say that. But I think it's important that you're aware that these are very real. We can't sign on to an IEP when we don't have the teachers available. So I thought maybe that would put into perspective some of the problems and where we need to go, where we need the immediate help.
Member Booth.
We certainly have to meet the needs of those students. So I'm confident that you have already identified the list of, we're not sure what to do with this one and this one and this one and this one. You're very much aware of the numbers of students and where they're located in the state and what would be necessary in order to provide the services that we must provide by law. So I think that would be number one consideration, I would think, are the services that we are currently not in a position to fulfill, so that we can, within the next few weeks, figure out a plan as to how we are going to hire, who we're going to hire, how, in what locations, and how we're going to meet the needs of those specific students. So the ones that are not being taken care of, that's a number one. Then possibly, just to maintain where we're at right now, we need to address those 7 positions or 11 positions. How many
11.
was that what needed to be backfilled that are current staff that are leaving because of whatever reasons, because that will be a part of being able to just maintain what we've already got going, even without the additions of some other staffing and other resources that will be needed for the new students that need to be added on by law. And then we can look at the entire big picture of the whole program. If we've met the needs of those that we currently are not in a position to meet and backfilled for what we are currently doing, then now the whole picture, what are the services that we must provide and the total cost of that and the total resources that must be in place. And then I think we can move on to the other 2 neighboring, and as Superintendent said, we'll undoubtedly be interspersing the conversation with all of the other issues that are being involved there, just because you can't talk about one without talking about the other. They're also interconnected.
Very true.
Thank you. Member Earl. And then Member Davis.
So I'm curious a little bit about how this plays out. So you might get an invitation for a student, let's just say in Morgan School District or up in Cache School District, right, for their IEP. And then you would just, in attending the meeting, you would indicate we have limited services. And so, or would you just say we're not able to meet the needs this year, so you'll need to we won't be attending your IEP? Do you see what I'm saying? Because
Right, I can answer that. I'm happy to answer that.
We're committing, right? Once we've signed an IEP. So what does that look like in a meeting, just so we're aware of that?
So in an IEP meeting, that, let's say the child was in Morgan, and it was a student that was a candidate for the School for the Blind. We say to the team that it's a team's decision, and we go through the whole IEP process, the present levels, the goals, the services, and then get to the placement. And if it is a student that is strong, as a strong candidate for the School for the Blind, we have to be very real, and we have to say, we don't disagree with you. We don't have the capacity at this time. We don't have a junior high classroom, and we don't have an extra classroom to put a junior high classroom in. So if it's an IEP team's decision, or I mean, it is an IEP, if you as the IEP team decide that it is critical that they be at the School for the Blind, we'll make something work. And so far, because again, we want to be compliant, right? And we also want the students to be served. We have a situation in Nebo where we have a principal that has said in a junior high classroom, well, maybe you could use one of our junior high classrooms because we have a need of junior high kids. And that's what we're saying. We don't have the capacity right now. So I have a junior high classroom, possibly. I have not personally talked to the principal, but I don't have a teacher. So we've got the personnel capacity and the space capacity. There have been different ideas that's been thrown around from people on these IEP teams, like, do you have a wait list, or do you have, those kinds of things? And that feels so wrong to me in special education. Leah can pipe in on this, but for under IDEA for special education, that we're putting students on a wait list or that we don't have the capacity. And I don't mean it to be, I don't want to be an alarmist, but yet this is what our directors are facing as far as they're going to these IEPs, and they have to be very honest, because we can't have kids be placed at USB with a lot of equipment, or even without any equipment, and not have the space and not be able to provide the services. That would be worse than providing intense services in the outreach.
So a local district, though, if you were unable to provide the services, if there was a waiting list or something, they would need to provide services in the IEP until, or at such a time there's resources available. Is that
Yes,
accurate?
and we have been able to, at this point, be able to provide outreach support and say, okay, we can help support this with this amount of time. And if a student has really intense vision needs, we're looking at about 180 minutes a day of intense vision needs. Well, that takes up a lot of time for an outreach teacher. But those are the kind of the conversations. We're walking a fine line, because we want to serve. We know to be compliant, we can't really discuss capacity to serve, but it's very real. And so far, the IEP teams have been gracious and understanding.
Thank you.
Member Davis.
Thank you. So legally, placement and location are two different things. So I think we need to be clear, and I maybe need to get more clear in my head about the IEPs, because if we go and say we don't have a room in our classroom, that is okay, because that is a location issue. I mean, it's not okay if that's the preference. We definitely want the more ideal situation, but you can still have FAPE in the LEA. But my question is, are we going to IEPs and saying we can't provide services? Because if I'm understanding correctly, everything below the 3% rule that we implemented, we must legally provide those services. Am I understanding that correctly? And those services are determined by placement, not location.
So to answer the question quickly, we are not saying that. We are not saying that we cannot provide services. That's not what we're saying. And when we're talking about capacity, we are talking about the location, not the placement. And that's why I brought up that, there was a principal that said you could use one of our classrooms. So it would be still a placement at the School for the Blind within that school district that we would be using their classroom. So does that answer your question? We're not saying that, and really, we just want to be open with the IEP team and transparent with them. But we're not saying what they should decide. We just want to make sure that they have all the information to decide on the placement.
Yeah, that's helpful. And I think for
Can
the
I add
public,
something?
I just
Cindy, can I-
wanted them to hear. Yes, I just wanted the public to hear that we are offering services and placement to
Absolutely.
provide FAPE, but
Absolutely.
sometimes what the ideal location could be may vary. Yeah.
Right.
But my only addition to what Susan said is we're not saying we can't provide services yet. This year currently. In the future, we're not sure that we'll be able to continue that. It's not like we will always say we can provide the services no matter what. There is a limitation of resources that we're looking at in the future. That's all I wanted to say.
May I follow up, Chair?
Yes, please.
Okay, so then we just have to drill down because we can't say we can't provide services. So it's either going to have to be the LEA or it's going to have to be USDB.
Right. That it's who
Someone's going to have to provide the services.
Yes, and that's my point. If we get to
Yeah.
that point, it will fall on the LEA to provide those services however they can. If we don't
Okay.
have capacity. Thank you.
Thank you.
So following up on that, when we talk about placement, that's either maintaining the services through a local education agency or placement in receiving services through USDB. Is that accurate?
Will you repeat that one more time?
So when you say placement versus location,
Mhm.
placement meaning who provides, not a location. We're talking about a location within the school for the deaf, but as far as placement, is that also a reference to who provides the services? A
Yes,
placement
it would
in
be.
the LEA versus
It would be the
place-
responsibility of who's carrying out the services on the IEP, who's the LEA that's responsible for that, or whatever placement is decided on the hierarchy within that LEA. For us, for the School for the Blind and School for the Deaf, it's change of the LEA. It would always be a change of the LEA. For a local or another district, it could be regular education to a self-contained classroom or self-contained
Oh,
classroom
okay.
to self-contained
Okay, so
school.
there's multiple, the kind of a
Right,
striation
right.
level layer of.
But it would always be a district to a USB or USDB or vice versa and back to, so it's a change of the LEA.
Okay, all right. Dr.
Michelle
Tanner,
might have something else to add as well.
she does, yes.
I was just going to add that when we talk about specifically students that are deaf and hard of hearing, we talk about placement. Placement would be whether the student is in a self-contained class or a self-contained school. So the only school for the deaf in the state of Utah is the Utah School for the Deaf. So if the IEP team meets and says the student needs to be placed in a self-contained school because they need to have access to people they could talk to on a daily basis, they have access to teachers and peers who they can address and talk to. Those people, those students that come to those classrooms are saying they need that kind of access. So in that case, the only place to go is the Utah School for the Deaf and at one of our campus programs. So they would, if the team made that decision, that's where they have to be placed because placement is self-contained school, self-contained class. You're in a mainstream class with supports or there's other little smaller, I'm talking about the big buckets, but a self-contained school, that's only Utah School for the Deaf for the deaf students. And in that case, then we would be their least restrictive environment. We would have to provide that service. If they're in a self-contained class, that's a class that Superintendent Patton described where it's in a regular ed school, but we have a classroom. That wouldn't be appropriate for most of my deaf students because then they still are in the same type of situation. They're still struggling to have access, to have friends to talk to have people to talk to. And then they're in a mainstream school. That's what we provide in the outreach. So then we can provide the whole continuum to the student that's placed into the classroom or the mainstream classroom. We send people out to assist and help them out. So it's a variety of things. So right now I would say the School for the Deaf, it can't say no. I don't know how we could say no. My only solution is to bulk up classrooms, which is what we've been doing. So we have more and more kids in a class than what we've typically had because there is no other self-contained school that those students could attend.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That was very helpful in clarifying how the different placement levels work. So again, board members, we are in March. So we have basically 6 months. We need to determine, and with input from our staff of both USB and USDB, how to move forward in this calendar to get to, as we're often said, what right is by a November meeting. Do we have input on? It looks like our scope of services, is April sufficient? Do we need to be working on that sooner? Is an April meeting that would be with our full board where we invite legislators in? Is that a sufficient time to start talking about services and how it'll probably be much as to what we've talked about here, but really looking deeping dive into some of our higher needs students. Dr. Tanner.
I would appreciate a conversation before April, simply because right now positions need to be posted so that we can know if we have enough positions to provide the services we've got. Am I going to be talking about 20s in a classroom, which is totally insane? Or am I talking the regular number of 10 in a classroom? So I need to have probably input sooner than April. I would have loved to have ended this week with saying we can post for these number of positions. These are the positions we can advertise. If we wait to April, the pool of applicants severely diminishes. And by the time we hit May, we already have a problem trying to hire people anyway, because there's not many people with the qualifications that we need. So it'll be even harder if we go. So I say the sooner the better, if you wouldn't mind.
Okay. And what does that mean? It's March 11th. What does
I would hope we meet next week.
Next week.
Yes.
Okay.
Let me ask a question to my own staff then to follow up on what Dr. Tanner just said. For Susan and Michelle, both of you, how much time can you be ready by next week with staffing recommendations within the scope of our forecasted budget?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll be ready by next week.
Yeah. We already have a really good idea. As our directors have been on this, and we're prepared with, yeah, we could be ready really quick, actually.
Thank you.
Okay. So next week we're recommending a deep dive into scope of services, service needs, what our faculty needs are. That means in April we can report out on how that was, how we implemented that. Deputy Superintendent Jones.
Just for clarification, or so my question, if I may, through you, ma'am, is are the solutions you're going to provide ongoing sustainable solutions, or are you going to provide solutions that will need, additional effort on the part or funding later on in like what we call the out years, from a perspective? So I think the expectation is that we'll provide a solution for ongoing sustainment based on what you're predicting or estimating you're going to receive as the influx of students that need your services. So what will that be? What will that look like?
So can I ask a clarifying question about your question, Scott?
Sure.
Part of what we come back with will be trying to make it just to the next fiscal year. It will not be sustainable long term because we have to operate within the resources we currently have.
Okay. I mean, I'm not sure though that that's the expectations. I think the expectations is how can you meet the requirements of given your budget in an ongoing manner as part of the analysis on, being able to provide services. So,
But I think that right now we're dealing with a temporary solution as to what we were requesting from the legislature was a temporary solution so that we had time to create a long-term sustainable solution. So I don't see that. I mean, I think that's where this next 6 months comes in, is that we are have to look at that bigger picture. But right now we're looking at, well, what can we do temporarily with the needs we have with staff?
Well,
Did you see it a different way?
yeah, I did. I saw it in a much different way. I saw it in a
Okay.
way that, as part of this analysis, it could be both. It could be, here's what we would have to do to meet what we've estimated is I don't know if it's the right word, the influx of students. You're saying that, I mean, the original request was for ongoing funds for 38 FTEs, right? And so I think we all want to see what the long-term plan is for sustainment of the service. If that means that there is a temporary solution, right, that you just articulated, Madam Chair, but then it also needs additional funding later on. I think that's fine. They also do want to see, though, if it's even feasible, though, that within the $55 million, the influx of students could be absorbed. And if not, why, right? Would it reduce other legally required programs, or, those types? It has to be that. It has to come to the conclusion of, in order to be able to do this, to provide services in the short term and then in the long term, this is what it will take, right? It will take us doing this in the near term, or it can be both. That's why I'm asking. I really think that we have to be able to demonstrate with that. I'm not trying to make a conclusion though here right now. We have to rely on the USDB staff to do what they said they can do in a week, which is provide that thing, but there has to be the long-term solution as well, right? And if that means that we have to communicate that it's going to need an increase to their base budget of 55 million, how much is that? What does that mean? What is the timing of that? That's, I think, what they want to see. So
Absolutely. And
legislature, I think we're saying the same thing, but I just wanted to clarify that I don't think it would be enough if we just said, well, we'll do this for 1 year and then you have to give us this. We have to be able to say we can't do it for longer than 1 year, and here's why.
Absolutely. I think that's the whole goal of this, as we plan out this next 6 months, is what needs to be done to that sustainable funding mechanism is the key. That's the end goal, is to
Right.
come back to the session next week where we have done everything we could to say, this is why we needed the extra money last year. This is why. This is the more, where we have more students, we need more staff, we need more space, all of those things. We have not done a great job in articulating the why yet. But I do not believe
Thanks,
that,
Matt.
if we could do it in a week, we would have done it in the last 45 days. So it's going to take longer, in my opinion. We have Member Davis, Member Earl, and Member Booth, and I'm going to turn off my camera and let each of you speak.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, this is a question for our Assistant Attorney General, AAG Beal, who I believe is on this call. So 53E-8-201 says may, that USDB may provide the services for the students in the LEAs. Does that trump the fee schedule? Or does the fee schedule trump the may that's in code? Because if the may supersedes the fee schedule, then we might have some flexibility in how we work with LEAs as far as what we're doing for this bridge session to get through, possibly temporarily, what we're doing, but it also will change how we move forward looking at long-term plans and solutions in general. I know our board rule requires that we provide all of the services for any LEAs that are under the 3% population rule. But where is the flexibility in code?
Can you speak?
Yes, sorry. So I do see what Member Davis is referencing in code. I see the may. I will give the caveat here that I am not as familiar with our financing kind of operations there. And so that's something I don't want to give you an answer right now because I don't understand all of the finance background to feel like I can confidently give you an answer. So if I can take that question and come back to you, I'd appreciate that.
That's fine with me, Chair, if it's okay with you.
Yes. Do you want to speak to that
Thank you.
quickly? Superintendent Jones, do you want to speak to that?
Right. So Madam Chair, the fee schedule what gives us the authority to collect those funds. The code that says USDB may provide the services, there was a reason why the word may was put in there, because of what we're doing right now is determining what what the governance of USDB looks like, and then what USDB's future posture or capabilities are on providing services. The law doesn't mandate that USDB provide the services. The interpretation of the rules are what is driving, and rightfully so, USDB to say, hey, look, we've got a mission here, we've got a job to do here, and we're going to do it, and that's awesome. That's great. But the short answer, I think, to Board Member Davis's question is the fee schedule is not, wasn't designed to provide flexibility on whether or not they provide services, if that's what she's asking. The fee schedule is simply just what gives us the authority, or USDB, the authority to collect those funds from the 3% or more districts. That's all that is. So does that help, or?
Are IEPs legally binding? That's
Yes, they
they
are.
are. So
Yes.
they're, as much as the code is an IEP that is written for a student to meet certain requirements, would one take precedence over the other? Does anyone, maybe that's another question.
Can I answer this real quick? We're talking about a couple of very different things here, and I think we're mixing them.
Can I
Where-
finish with mine and then move
Yep.
on to that one?
Yep. Go ahead.
Cindy, there's an answer to your previous question too, we didn't cover yet. As a state agency, we are not allowed to collect fees that the law does not specifically allow us to collect. Right now, it
This
only
is my
allows,
question.
even though it said may in that other area, we still cannot collect fees. If the board was to change that, gotta have legislative approval for doing it also.
That's my question, is can we adjust the amount paid? Because it says may, we didn't have to do it in the first place, so can we adjust what's in that fee schedule? Because, and is the may new this year, or has the may always been there? Those are my follow-up questions.
Do you want me to answer that?
Yes, if you want to speak to that, please do.
Okay. It can be changed, but it has to be the legislature that changes it. That's why we requested doing that at closer to the beginning of the session, before the session started. And now it's too late without the legislature convening and changing the legal authorization. When we talk about fee schedule, it's not just the amount we can charge for a fee. It also, we have language in there also that limits how much we can bring in total, even at that rate, and who we can charge for that. All of that has to be changed legislatively.
Okay, is the may new this year, or has it always been there?
It's not new.
Yeah,
Thank you.
It's not new.
Yeah, I agree with Michelle. It's been in for quite a while, Madam Chair.
Thank you. All right.
That's all helpful. Thank you.
All right, Member Earl.
Yeah, what is the code for the fee? What bill was that? Does anyone know that right offhand? I tried to look real quick and not sure what I'm looking for, what the title of it is.
Yeah, Deborah might have that, Madam Chair.
Okay.
SB 008, Senate Bill 8,
Okay.
Madam Chair.
And I think it spells out in there a little bit clearer that these ones can and these ones can.
3%. Yeah. Yes,
Okay.
ma'am. Yeah.
And then and I know you're saying we're inflating stuff maybe between the IEP requirement and the code saying we may or may not. I'm just trying to understand the nuances there, meaning that it does seem that that if there is a requirement to provide a service, that we are legally bound to do that, even if the code suggests that we may or may not, which would indicate that we may provide that service if the IEP requests it. I don't know if there's as much flexibility as sounding like, it's optional. Whether we decide to engage or not, I personally don't believe that's the case. Sorry, I didn't turn my video on. I can't remember. I had another question,
Jenny,
but
I just want to clarify that we need to make really sure because we're in public here. There's no choice. You have to give the services on the IEP. The MAE is who does it, if it's USDB or the LEA. The MAE doesn't pertain at all to if it gets done.
right. I understand that part, but I think we're making it a little bit sound like USDB is the optional part. And maybe and I guess it is. Okay. So except if an entity feels that USDB is the best service provider for a student and they put it in the IEP, then that isn't an optional piece. Is that accurate? And I guess
it depends. You're back to location.
Well, but as we said,
talk.
in terms of a deaf student, if that least restrictive environment is in a self-contained school, then there is no MAE. That is where they need to be placed.
That's why it depends. Yeah.
Okay. And I actually had another question. I should have written it down because then we got talking on other things and I got lost there. Oh, I know what it was. I guess maybe I just did what Leanne had said just a minute ago, because by next week, we're not going to have all the solutions out on the table. And as a matter of fact, we provided what we considered a solution and a recommendation for this upcoming year. The legislature, whoever they are, did not, EAC or someone did not want that or did not find that. So they wanted that. But I don't think by next week, I think next week we've got to come up with solutions for the upcoming year. And then the ongoing discussions would be, and I think that's what Leanne had said, that would be looking at those other provisions and some other questions that were asked in the intent language.
Thank you. Member Booth?
Thank you, Chair. I am really grateful for this chance to dive deep. And I'm looking forward to next week's meeting where we can dive deep for immediate solutions for this very specific school year. They will not be ideal. It will require creative efforts on everyone's part in order to meet all of the needs of the students and to be able to lock in the faculty and the staff supporters that we need in order to make this happen. But I'm much more excited about the deep dive into future plans, because I believe that we have not articulated the plans in enough detail, helping particularly our decision makers in the legislature understand what is specifically unique about the needs of our blind and deaf students. I want them to understand clearly that in order to provide the services, the educational services, and the growth opportunities that these specific students need that are under our care, under our watch, requires a different approach than we use with any other special needs children in the state and any other regular students that we might find. And when I say regular, I'm meaning regular students that are not uh, facing the additional challenges that one might face when the student is blind or has hearing challenges. So I just really want us to take advantage of this opportunity to dive deep, to ask the questions, to articulate the solutions in ways that it really gives uh, our decision makers in the legislature enough information that they can fully appreciate the need and the reason to support these amazing students and the dedicated faculty who are working with them. That is going to be a really exciting experience to be able to discover what it is that is going to be needed ongoing. And because we're living in a state where there is much growth, we can anticipate that same kind of growth and perhaps even more because it's not just normal growth. We also have lots of people from other recognizing the excellent educational opportunities available for blind and deaf students, and they are uprooting their families and moving to the state. So if there's a sudden increase that we weren't anticipating or projecting in our normal projections, that's because we're doing things right. And students are having their needs met, and they are graduating and learning and growing because of the wonderful services and the wonderful experiences that are being provided. So this is a deep dive. It may take certainly more than one meeting and a lot of preparation on the outside and additional sidebar meetings, but it's certainly going to be worth it. Um, we also have no control over an act of God. And when he decides he's going to bless us with some additional students in this particular area, then I, for one, and I know there are many that are eager to join me, are ready with open arms to catch this new little bundle and prepare to help them make this journey, this educational journey through life that's going to help them succeed and be happy. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you. Member Brinton.
I think I just want to know from Joel and the other superintendents, like what can we do as board members? I am brand new to this area and I'm so grateful for all on the committee that are already helping. And I echo what Member Booth just said. I would be happy to go to interim meetings to try to advocate with legislators to do whatever we need to do, especially after visiting the school. I recognize that the needs are different. We need much smaller class sizes, more aides, qualified aides to help these children. And so please let us know let me know too how I can help in that.
I was just going to say, I think I would appreciate, and I do appreciate currently, that you guys care enough to dig in and understand and see the value of our children. Our students grow up to be great individuals, and it's hard to sit in this seat to see a child who I absolutely know that the schools for the deaf and the blind, with the expertise we have, could make a great difference. And to be withheld, to not help, it's feel like watching a child that doesn't have any food and not be able to hand them food when I have plenty. So when we watch these kids, I appreciate that you guys care about our students, number one. And the more you dig in the weeds and help to understand what it is and why they need what they need, that is the greatest service that you can give, because then it's not just our voices, it's all of your voices who have great understanding to share that. And I appreciate that.
Thank you, Dr. Tanner. So we have 1 minute. As I've placed out a schedule right now, we're looking at a special meeting next week. And I guess I would ask staff if that requires a motion. Do we need to, or does that simply require me going to leadership to confirm that we can do that? And then April will report out on what was done with that meeting in our public meeting. And then I didn't get any recommendations for how we move forward on the rest of these meetings. And I also need to know if a motion needs to be made in terms of recommending to the board, or if we can do that in next week's meeting in use of our enrichment funds for potential supports to fill some of these gaps. Superintendent Coleman.
I think that motion would be in order in the next board meeting. The second thing, I think what we've identified here is that if we meet as a working group next week sometime, we're just going to be hammering out the immediate needs so that we can have our ducks in a row for next year. Then after that, it seems like we're going to start chewing away at the other items from the EAC motion language. I will share that on, I think, Friday night, I was contacted by Representative White, who just wanted to give me a heads up that a request would be filed for an audit, for the legislative audit of USDB, to answer all of the questions that were asked again by the legislative fiscal analyst during the session. And I think that will dovetail with what Board Member Booth said, is that we have to find a way to explain all of this to legislators. I think that's their effort of getting to the same understanding. And so internally, we already are working on a document trying to answer all those questions so that when the audit comes up, we already have our input prepared for them.
Okay. And do we have any timing on that?
No, he just said he was filing the request at the request of the Public Ed Appropriations Subcommittee,
Okay.
and that he didn't not even know if it would be approved, because the management committee of the legislature has to approve audits. But he just wanted to be transparent and let us know that the request was being submitted.
Okay. And there has been some discussion of us asking whether our audit committee could partner with them so that we could look at it from a financial perspective through PEA, but through a performance look through us as our role of governance. So we may put Vice Chair Hart to discuss that with them as they move forward.
Great, thank you.
So, Member Davis.
Just a quick request, if we're going to add a meeting in for next week, that a doodle poll be sent with lots of options, because it's almost impossible for this group to get our schedules together. We're all very, very busy.
It was hard enough to find this Tuesday morning.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll move forward with that. If we need a motion to do the enrichment, we can do that in our next meeting, unless anyone feels, because that will not go to the board until April anyway. So I think we have time to make that motion in the next week's meeting. So other than a doodle poll, any other requests or last minute comments before we take one more motion? Not seeing any other comments, so I will take a final motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Right. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 All right. Thank you so much. I find every time we talk about these special kids, it's a long conversation. So thank you for being here and being up for the challenge.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.